Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and we're all at home. We're reading some back issues, and I've been talking to some friends of mine. We've been doing like a little book club for the last week or so, maybe a week and a half. We've been reading Batman: The Long Halloween. We followed it up with Batman: Dark Victory. The Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale masterpiece. As far as their Batman stories go, and here to talk with me about it today is my good friend Josh. And then my other good friend, Nalo. How you guys doing?
Doing great, Wes. Great to be back on the channel, discuss my favorite character, Batman, and favorite story.
Well, I'm glad that you guys could make it. So The Long Halloween is a pretty celebrated Batman story. I don't know if it's everybody's, maybe not their top, number one Batman story, but it always seems to be in that top five. Josh, what just generally feelings like what is The Long Halloween Dark Victory set of stories from Loeb and Sale, like what do they mean to Batman and in the annals of history?
Oh man, they're kind of like that story that you hear all the rumors about, like, oh man, this great story, but not many, you don't hear it talked about that much. Like you hear Court of Owls, Hush, Under the Red Hood classics, like those talked about a lot. But it's definitely the top five Batman stories of all time. This is classic stuff.
So Nalo, you said Batman is your favorite character. Is this a top 10 Batman story, top 5 Batman story for you?
I would say definitely top 5, up there with like Year One for me. One of the rarest stories that is so methodical, so well put together, and has so much depth. It's a long story, but really shows Batman and the light you don't get as often, where it's a murder mystery, which you really like, so it brings out this detective aspect, but also has all the characters that you come to know and love, from the Rogues, as well as this Two-Face origin story. And you really get to see it in kind of these early days in a way that almost feels like an expansion of Frank Miller's Batman Year One, and kind of giving you a chance to still be in these early days and really be on the edge of your seat. So it's one of the ones that is a much greater mystery than something like Hush, which probably has more popularity.
Yeah, so just getting into it, the first thing that really struck me, when reading The Long Halloween the first time is just the art is gorgeous. In the color choices, the color palettes, like, they're not extremely dynamic. They're kind of they're more muted, but I think it fits the story. The kind of noir setting that you're getting throughout. Man, Tim Sale draws one hell of a Batman, especially Cloaked in Darkness.
Yeah, the muting on the colors and the way that Sale draws Batman as like this creature of the shadows. He's always cloaked in darkness. A lot of times you can only see his eyes. Just is awesome. Long Halloween was just in the book. I don't think there was a bad looking panel in that entire book.
No, this is definitely in his prime Tim Sale. There are a couple of character choices as far as the way that they're rendered. I'm not a big fan of the way Ivy looks. It is interesting that she's essentially just an enormous plant, but not my favorite version of Ivy, and not my favorite version of Selena Kyle either. But this is one of the moodiest Batman books I've ever read, but it's not like gothic, and it's certainly not horror vibe, but it's much more in line with a murder mystery, kind of thing that you would maybe get out of the 50s or 60s.
Also kind of Gotham feels a little bit timeless. There's no real technology involved either, so it could be, it's hard to say what decade this may be taking place in. You get this kind of earlier Jim Gordon, but he's kind of surrounded by these old-timer police force members that kind of harken back to, I've heard stories that the police used to, drive up to beer distributors and fill up their mug before going out on patrols. So kind of really gives this old, moody, post-World War II vibe, and really it just achieves timelessness, in my opinion.
God, they're just such a dynamic, creative team together. I really like the characterization. I think that's really where the story and Jeff Loeb knock it out of the park, especially when basically Batman is the narrator. It is a great story, and it's a Batman story, but it's so much more than that. But as the narrator, there's little hints that he puts in there. Like whenever he speaks about Wayne Manor, he always refers to it as his father's house. Like he doesn't totally feel at home there. It's not his yet. Like he feels like he's living in maybe another person's life, or he's filling someone else's shoes.
I mean, yeah, it was definitely an interesting take, to see him kind of feel like I haven't really earned the right to call this, my house yet, and I don't really feel like I belong in it. It really goes to show with that how complete Long Halloween and Dark Victory are, how much Dark Victory takes from Long Halloween and kind of builds off of it, because you see that change. But yeah, I thought that was really cool.
The other supporting character, because I consider Batman and Jim Gordon supporting characters to Harvey Dent, who's certainly the star of this story, in my opinion. Jim Gordon in here is excellent. It feels right out of Batman Year One. He's dedicated to the job. He's a man out of place. He got brought in from Chicago, not completely trusted, knows that all the rest of the police are kind of on the take and the city is dirty, but he's committed fixing the city by solving one crime at a time, and it completely is wrecking his home life. You see it happen through all the issues. I like the determination of the character, and it felt like 100% Jim Gordon. The characterization on Jim was just perfect.
I'll just also add the characterization of the mobsters as well. It just kind of feels more real than any normal, even any story, because you get so much characterization of so many mob members, so many of the DA in their office, and it just like you feel so in this world in a way that even most TV shows can't achieve.
One thing about the characterization of the mobsters that I really appreciate is as the stories go on and more of these, they call them quote unquote freaks, the supervillains emerge. You can feel the desperation of the mobsters to kind of like try to keep their grasp on this city that's clearly being torn out from under them. That I thought that was really cool, that you actually do kind of feel sympathy for these criminals because they're just losing everything that they've worked so hard to build.
The mob war between the Falcone and the Maronis is certainly the driving force of the story, and it ends up being the main focus and why everything is happening. And it leads to this killer that shows up, and his name is Holiday. At least they call him like the Holiday Killer, because every holiday he's basically killing somebody with a 22 caliber revolver with like a baby bottle nipple on it, as a kind of a ganky silencer. And we kind of get hints throughout the story, but that's when you start really feeling the effects on Harvey Dent. And this is absolutely a Harvey Dent story. This is a Two-Face origin story. So like halfway through reading Long Halloween, I was kind of confused. I was like, it feels like Batman's reacting a lot here, but he's not really being proactive in going and solving things. But then when I kind of got to the end, I realized this isn't a Batman story. He's certainly involved, but this is so much a Harvey Dent and a character evaluation on, you kind of see him at the beginning of the story, and he's certainly a very moralistic character. He's working hand in hand with Batman and Gordon. He does have a little bit of a whatever it takes attitude. And as the mob war rages on and it gets bigger and the body count gets larger and larger, you can see him kind of taking that whatever it takes attitude even further and becoming less and less himself. And his wife kind of sees it, and you see it like a descent, in himself and in his home life.
It implies that darkness, that emerges with Two-Face was always there in Harvey. That intensity, that little bit of darkness, it grew and grew. It was always there, but the war between the Falcones and the Maronis, it grew and grew because Harvey was trying to do his best to stop them, and the body count just kept going, like you said. Then you had the Holiday Killer, and then it's finally all unleashed and takes over when Two-Face emerges.
By the end, we finally get the reveal on who Holiday is, and it turns out it's one of the Falcone children. It was kind of brushed off by his father at the end, and you thought he had died earlier in the story, and it's revealed that he's the Holiday Killer. There's definitely hints at the end that it wasn't just one killer, and it kind of feels like maybe Harvey Dent was the other Holiday Killer the whole time, or maybe even it was his wife.
I think it's heavily implied that it's either his wife or that she was helping him, and it kind of speaks to these dark undertones that you feel emerging, that Batman, and you see this a lot in Dark Victory, he feels very guilty that in Long Halloween he almost revealed his secret to Harvey Dent, and he in that book has a lot of regret that maybe that could have helped turn him, but he had this sneaking suspicion through the whole Long Halloween that I can't really trust Harvey Dent. I just have this hunch that he's involved. There's something about him that doesn't really seem like he is who he claims to be. Maybe he's a little Two-Faced. And I think that really is like the theme that It's left open-ended, but I think you kind of have to trust your hero in his gut that there wasn't really something right there, and it's something that torments him. In the next book, you can connect the dots that the real holiday killer was not who it claims to be, and that's maybe how they kind of get him out of the jail through the kind of playing the legal system in the next issue, because they can say, there was a lot of two-faced under the surface things happening here, and we can kind of now play this to our advantage.
Now that we're getting into Dark Victory, it does lead into the sequel, and at the very beginning, Falcone's is released from jail because there's a new DA that's replaced Harvey Dent. I believe her name is Porter. She has a different point of view on these things. They specifically brought her in because she was different than Harvey Dent, because now Two-Face is in Arkham. He does get sprung out, at one point. And then we have a new killer emerge that is basically killing people on holidays. But now there's a clue on them where there's these hangman riddles on their chest. What did you guys think about the murder mystery on that one? Because I liked it more the way they did it. I liked the fact that there was riddles and clues being involved in that one. Whereas in the first one, the murders would happen, there would be like a souvenir that was left behind.
I really like that, actually. If we think there might be two killers in the Long Halloween, this one it heavily implies, because Hangman can only really be played by two people. So it kind of leads you to believe that there's also two killers here. It's kind of like an inverted mirror of Long Halloween, that there's still a holiday killer out there. And I think that the mystery is actually way more complex and takes a lot more twists and turns in Dark Victory for me.
It's kind of cool that as a reader, the mystery is so deep it pulls you into it, and you're trying to figure out who the Hangman killer is. Like, there's high stakes involved with it, and you can see the toll that it's taking on both Batman and Gordon to bring this person to justice. So yeah, it's definitely a much more complex and deep-rooted mystery than what we had going on in the Long Halloween.
And I just love how all the same kind of characters and rogues show up, all kind of super jacked, and this universe just goes deeper and more expanded. And I also just got to plug the Calendar Man, because we can't forget him. That is not acceptable.
He's like the Hannibal Lecter of the story, where he's kind of has his own narrative. He's kind of feels like he's being overshadowed by the holiday killer, where he should be like the ultimate killer associated with time.
Well, I thought about him in Dark Victory because we keep forgetting him, but no, he's just forgotten. No, ultimately.
In Dark Victory, what I found was interesting about Jim Gordon is we've jumped ahead in time, and we finally see the fallout from him putting himself into his job, everything that was taken out of him, from the holiday killer and everything in the Long Halloween. It's cost him his family. His wife has left him. She's taken his children with him. The only thing he has left, and we see that when they do the Thanksgiving celebrations kind of at the beginning, the only thing he has left is the job in Batman, basically. He has no really allies. He's been put in that position because he was made famous by the holiday killer, and they needed a straight commissioner. But he's not really trusted. There are other people eyeing for his seat, and he's basically given up everything, in the pursuit of justice for Gotham. He's looking for companionship. He's looking for something more now because he feels empty inside.
Yeah, it definitely goes to show the toll that the job takes on Gordon and his responsibilities. You start to see him become, obsessed with the work. And I really like that there was like the same picture of Gordon, and he had his like investigation board behind him. And then each issue there would be new and different pieces of evidence pinned up to that board. So it kind of goes to show you how Gordon moved along with the case. I mean, Barbara does come back to him, and, he gets his wife and his son and his family life back, which really kind of light and the motivation that he needs to, push through a lot of the struggles he's dealing with. And, you can kind of see that better man emerge again in Gordon because of that.
And we see something similar with Batman in that he's really cold, he's isolated, he's clearly going through a lot, losing the friend of Harvey Dent. And what I really liked is the first clue, we believe it to be no one is safe, or none of you are safe. And Batman keeps accidentally repeating it as no one is safe. And Alfred's like, sir, it's none of you are safe. And he's like, Alfred, just get out of here if you're not going to be helpful. Like, really, really nasty. And it really kind of shows like that Batman actually needs assistance and needs help, because once Dick Grayson comes into the picture, he actually understands the clue is 9 of you are safe. And that's actually, not exactly what the game we expected, but it's more like secret messages being sent to you. And, the game actually may not be being played by 2 people. And this is more like cryptographic codes being sent, and really shows how Batman, can't just be isolated. He can't always just be right, and he needs kind of the help of the Bat family, and it kind of sets the foundation for that.
Speaking of Dick Grayson, I know that's your favorite character in all of comics, Josh. What do you think about Dick Grayson in Dark Victory?
I wasn't expecting to like it. I was expecting something similar to a Frank Miller take on him, but he was kind of bratty, but I mean, he's also like 8 years old, so it kind of made sense. And they had him break. Basically, he gave Batman the one big clue he needed to, figure out what was going on with the Hangman Killer. So it kind of goes to show, like, Grayson plays that role perfectly, that even as a child, just having his eyes, a different pair of eyes on the evidence that Batman had been, killing himself over, getting that extra perspective and that other pair of eyes and a unique take broke the case for him. It shows him that it's the perfect version of Grayson. It's exactly what he's supposed to be.
Let's talk about the killer. So in the Long Halloween, Falcone's daughter Gigante is introduced to the story. She basically they try to murder her, but she survives. We see that here. She's in a wheelchair. She's got like a halo on. But it's also, in the first story, we find out that she's had an affair with Maroni in the past. So she might have had, dual allegiances kind of thing. But by the time we get to this story, she's basically the head of the family. Falcone's dead. Her brother was in prison. Maroni is dead as well. So she's lost all these people. And if you look at it, it's all at the hands of the police. So when you look at the victims and then you look at the person who would have the most motive, and in the end, it seems obvious who it should have been, but she was in a wheelchair and had a halo, and she could have done it because she was handicapped, but she wasn't handicapped.
It shows you, we're probably not as smart as Batman either and couldn't figure it out while reading it, but it does hold up. Like, there isn't a plot hole. And they do even flesh it out where Catwoman disappears for a bunch of issues. She goes to Italy, and I believe there is the follow-up that shows her time in Italy that they did later on, but she's like, I couldn't find the surgeon anywhere. She didn't actually get this kind of reconstructive surgery to be in a wheelchair that she claims. It's a surprise to me, but yeah, the motives really add up, and it kind of is like the apex of this kind of crime family rebuilding and a city beset by freaks that becomes a battlefield of gangsters, and it's kind of perfect for me. While reading it, I thought it might have been Gilda Dent. I then thought it was Calendar Man, and then I was like, oh, wow. So they really kept me guessing.
And then there was a hint in the story, a couple of hints, but the big one is, she falls down a set of stairs, and then Joker is like, but can you walk? Kind of thing, and gives you a hint that maybe he knows that she could actually walk.
Yeah, it's definitely in there, and she has the motives. Each of the siblings is taking the turn being the villain from the Long Halloween to then Dark Victory, so must really be running in that Falcone blood.
When we look at the two stories, I think Long Halloween is the better story because it sets up everything, and the characterization and the world building done in that is perfect. But I do think the murder mystery and the payoff is actually much better in Dark Victory.
No, I definitely agree with that, and I think you share the same opinion that I do.
Yeah, so Dark Victory can't stand on its own. Long Halloween is super methodical, 10 out of 10, perfectly constructed, but it's kind of like if you like that universe, you're going to get way more threads, way more complexity, and you're just going to get a way super interesting Batman story.
Well, I think we've covered the gamut. I'm going to give you guys some opportunities for some last words on the story, but hopefully we can do this again. Maybe we'll find another classic story. Because I do like these deep dive and kind of dissecting stories and talking about the things that were done well. In this one, there isn't much that wasn't done well in both stories. Like I said, there's a couple of character choices as far as the design of Ivy. I don't really like the design of Selena Kyle, but you're really nitpicking to find stuff you don't like in these books. Josh, what are your final thoughts on the Long Halloween, Dark Victory?
I think they're classic stories. I think they should be talked about a little more in the Batman mythos than they are. To me, it's the perfect Batman story. It's him as a detective. You have. I never realized how much I appreciate Batman taking on just pure, plain, organized crime. These stories really showed that that's when Batman is at his best. When he's doing detective work and he's taking on just plain, organized crime. I thought all the characterizations were great. But I'll tell you what, after I read after I read Long Halloween and Dark Victory, Two-Face is by and far my favorite Batman villain. He was kind of climbing up the ranks, but holy cow, it was just such a good story, for him. And like you said, Wes Harvey Dent took center stage in this, and man, did Loeb and Sale deliver with that. Like the pages at the end of Long Halloween when they splash in the red as Two-Face kills Falcone. Like, oh my gosh, just so good.
Well said. So, Naldo, what are your final thoughts on Long Halloween, Dark Victory?
I'll keep it short, but for anyone listening who hasn't read them, I sincerely encourage you to check them out. I was doing my reread of Dark Victory, and almost every page I was just like, wow, this story is just so good. And I'm like, I read it all in one day. It's really everything you would want and expect, and done on like much higher sophisticated level than kind of the books we're getting these days. And it just feels timeless to me. I love the aspects where they have, politics, the DA, the structure of the mob, Bruce kind of figuring out who he is. It kind of has everything that we know and like about Batman, every single thread, but back in time. So kind of like, if you want to consider it canon in your own head, it's really like just foundational, and it kind of has every single theme, laying the seed for that, and something that can really just be built off of forever, and just have 2 back-to-back murder mysteries that keep you on the edge of your seat. So these are some of the best books you could read, especially if you're stuck at home. So check them out.
Absolutely. All right, fellas, I really appreciate it. And like I said, we got to do this again. I really enjoyed this.